Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the Upland Forum, honoring student leaders inspiring the future at Upland Strong. Good evening, folks. I am your host, Carlos Garcia, and tonight's episode is something truly special. On the special edition of the Upland Forum, we shine a spotlight on an exceptional young man, Miles DeShazo, a stand-up senior from International Polytechnic High School, whose leadership, drive, and heart for community are already making a difference. So in a world that's constantly asking what the future looks like, Miles reminds us that the answer is already walking among us, and it's filled with purpose and promise. Whether you're a student, a parent, a longtime Upland resident, tonight's show will leave you inspired by the next generation and more hopeful than ever about what's ahead. So let's dive in, because this isn't just a conversation, it's a celebration of leadership, legacy, and the bright future of Upland. So help me welcome Miles. I also have Lisa, who I will introduce here shortly. And I have Miles' parents as well. So welcome to the show. How are you guys?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
All right, Lisa, would you care to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Lisa Prieto, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I specialize in children under the age of 6.
Excellent. And I want to also give an opportunity for your parents to introduce themselves.
Yes, I'm Mark DeShazo, my wife Elsa, and our son Miles is doing his senior project this year. So we're very proud of the work that he's done.
Excellent. So, and obviously the man of the hour, Mr. Miles. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. Hey, so let's start with, first of all, let's start how this whole project came about. Tell folks out there what this is about, and keep in mind, folks, that we are hosting a session this Saturday at the Upland Library, but we'll get into those details a little later. But I want you guys to hear how this young man came about regarding his project. Take it away, man.
So, a bit about my high school, Poly. Every senior is required to do some sort of year-long project. And so what we were originally encouraged to do is to research a topic that we're passionate about. And I started with video games. In particular, it started with something I'd heard of, but wasn't exactly sure was real: video game addiction. And I wanted to do a project to see, well, I first wanted to do research on video game addiction. And when finding out that there is some sort of problem there, if there is, otherwise I'd pivot to something else, how could I address that? And so I did find that while video game addiction isn't officially classified, there are still problems that people can have with it. But there's a second part of the project, which is making an impact in our community. And I didn't really have a path forward there. So I looked somewhere adjacent. And where that took me next was children, and not just video games. And so I instead looked at the impact that screen time has on children, and I found a much more concerning problem, and one that I could actually do something about.
And so, how did Lisa? How did you get involved with this?
Miles came to me early on the project and asked me, how can I get a hold of somebody that will help me have more understanding about gaming addiction? And so a lot of my colleagues feel it's a comorbidity, which means 2 diagnoses: an addiction and also problems with something else, like maybe depression or anxiety or a social phobia. So when he and I were talking, and Mom Elsa was talking about it, I really said, my problem is in smaller brains, and the 0 to 3 population of them being offered electronics way too soon. And that started the conversation. And the next thing you know, here we are. I'm on a podcast, my first one. So that's how exciting it is, and that's how fast it moves.
That's awesome. Which, it's a perfect transition now to bring your parents into this. So did he discuss this with you guys? What was like your whole take on this project for him?
Yeah, but I think he was kind of struggling with research to support video game addiction.
Your mic is dropping. I don't know. There's something with the sound on there.
I'm sorry. Is this better?
A little bit better, yeah.
He was also finding enough research for video game addiction, and so it was we were kind of talking through it. Elsa is a kindergarten teacher, and so she brought up the point that hey, this is something that is a real problem in younger kids, but it's too much screen time, and parents not getting their face in front of their kids and just spending time with them. And so, I think that really opened up the idea of being able to, do something along that line of, letting the community know that screen time in small children should uh, be limited or non-existent because it can be damaging to the smaller brain.
And so I want to bring up exactly what you guys are going to be talking about Saturday, and it's the impact of electronics on the developing brain, right? And for me, it was definitely it was really an awesome subject, especially coming from a young man, right? From Miles, because he's lived through this stuff too. And when you talk about video addiction, I have to, I'm going to confess, man, I'm a video gamer, and there's some games that you just can't put down. I'm guilty of that, right? But it's not what I want, because I've also had my son spend a lot of times on gaming and things like that. But there's, as an adult, there's a limit of how I don't want him. I want him to go outside, go play, dude. You're not in front of the screen as many hours as you need to be. But I think what's fascinating is coming from your perspective, because you pretty much have lived this from day one. We're in a whole different world back than when we started. I look at some old things, of jokes back in the 80s where what we had was just basically bikes, the lights go down and you were back home. Bikes, hanging around with your friends, go to parks. Now it's everybody. You see people don't even pay attention when they're walking because they're constantly on a device. I see kids coming from school, crossing streets, looking at the device, not looking at the cars. And it's just like, man, you guys are just, too attached to this stuff. So I want to ask Lisa, what are some of the things that you've experienced, right, and related to this?
So my demographic is, of course, 0 to 5, but a lot of the problems start when parents don't know how to help a child regulate. And they offer a device, maybe with Miss Rachel or Bluey, that will attract a child, but it doesn't help with regulation. It distracts, but it doesn't aid. And so my job is to really help parents understand what co-regulation looks like. What does it mean to help my child regulate without the use of an electronic, without something with a blue screen that will impact their ability to sleep and regulate on their own. So my job starts at birth. My youngest is 1 month old. And I have to work with the caregivers to help them understand that television is not intended for them. Even baby Einstein, not the best idea if they're under the age of 3. So it's really about education. We call it psychoeducation. We want to make sure that parents are aware and prevent problems later on when a child needs to regulate themselves instead of relying on a device we call it focusing on more green time and less screen time. Get outside, take a walk, make sure that they're exposed to grass under their feet and not just holding an electronic in their hand.
And it's interesting because everywhere you look, especially like young parents, right? Since they don't have the skill set and they're still learning. You see, like in restaurants, for example, the little ones, it's like, here, just give them something, give them your phone so you can be quiet. That's like the immediate answer for everything, and it's unfortunate that these things happen. Miles, for you, what was that point, man, where you realized that this is actually a problem that made you want to really do this? Like, what just sparked in you that said, this is a real problem?
I think part of it is with other children I've interacted with, I'm kind of like I was kind of born in that sweet spot where as a little kid, the technology wasn't completely there for screens to engage me all the time. So I still had plenty of time to, or I still had other things that would draw my attention more. And I think part of it is my parents too. They would read to me pretty often. And so I was engaged in books instead. But now, like, um, with younger kids, I know, like, with my cousins and my friends' cousins, the screen seems to take up a lot more of their time. And um, it's pretty concerning to me when I talk to them and all that comes out is like references to videos I've or they've watched. It's a bit strange to me, and I
So
thought,
how did they receive that? Because you're the older cousin, or you're more of an authority figure for the little ones. So how do they perceive these conversations coming from you? Right? It's not coming from mom and dad, an adult. This is somebody that they can relate to. That knows what they're talking about. Right? Because let's face it, all little kids think that they know everything right away, and they don't listen to us. Right? So how do some of those conversations go with some of your cousins?
well, with my friends' cousins, they don't listen to me either.
Okay.
Uh, with my cousins, they're being brought back onto the right track, and so I've been able to have like normal play with them as well.
And as parents, for you guys, I know that like I said, we're in different times the way we grew up, on a lot of things. So how was that for you guys? Trying to maintain that away from the screen time and all that.
We definitely, as an educator, it's something that I made
I'm not hearing you at all.
sure.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. So as an educator, I'm always making sure that I was exposed to activities throughout the Upland community. During the summer, there are swimming at the pool and swimming lessons, and so I encourage the community.
Mhm.
And I noticed in my own students, I taught kindergarten for 20 years, special education, and I noticed that students coming in with a lot of deficits in writing and in language. And so it was concerning because I noticed that they were also just engaging in a lot of screen time, not a lot of play. And so for me, it was important for them to communicate with one another.
So, and kind of like what she was saying on there, Lisa. I'm sure you come across a lot of parents in the same way, right? So as a new parent watching, wanting to find out more information on this, what's the best steps or what's the best approach for them to start thinking about doing things a little bit different?
Okay, the first thing that you need to do is need to go to the library on Saturday and listen to my whole presentation because
And,
it
and
is
here's the
very
part, folks. So make sure you take note of that. Take a screenshot. Do whatever you need to do, but you
yeah.
have to be there at 11 on Saturday. I will be there, so I'll make sure come and say hello, and we want to make sure we support this as well.
Right. Yes, I think that the difference, because I have a lot of friends that have tablets and phones for their kids, but what set Mark and Elsa apart was the Elsa's history and education and her ability to sit down and really work with them, and Guy and Mark with the same. Him being, to me, savant when it comes to electronics. He would be the person I would go to for questions. So together they had this brilliant mind and the ability to sit next to Miles and really lead him in the way. He was at my house at 3 years old reading everything on the wall.
Wow.
Happy fall, y'all. I mean, he didn't really even understand the concept of that, but he was still reading the things in my home. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this kid is so smart. And what are we going to do to keep that going? And so it's really important that when parents tap into an interest, the presentation on Saturday is going to really go into what to do when they're under 18 months. And then what do you do when they're 18 months to 3 years old, when they can handle a little bit of electronics, but they need to have a caregiver next to them, grandma, grandpa, and uncle, older cousin, to really explain to them what they're seeing. And then after that, the screen time elevates, but we want to do things in a balanced way, everything in moderation, because we want to protect these small brains. If they know how to log on to the internet, they can be subjected to images that we're not ready for them to see. So we have to be really protective of what images they have access to.
And I think this definitely is one of those talking points for parents, right? That we can do an entire series on different things, right? You have the different age groups, things that everybody experiences. So this is not going to be like the only time you guys are going to be on. I think it'll be great perspective to just carry this further than what you're covering on Saturday. But it also opens the door to just, like you said, you got to keep kids safe. A lot of what I did and still do is I do a lot of cybersecurity. I've been in charge of taking over school districts, making sure kids are safe. But man, there's a lot of bad stuff out there and unfortunately, parents aren't aware of it. I always joke with my son, and my son, thank God he's doing things great. But I told him, unfortunately, you got the short end of the stick, man, because I'm in IT. So there's no way you're going to ever get past me. I'm always going to be 10, 20 steps ahead of you just to keep them safe and protected, And it's also a message that we need to also let parents know how to really protect themselves. Not, obviously this for development, but also how to keep their family safe when you do get to that point where you're going to utilize devices. So that's another thing that, in the future we can definitely cover, for sure. Miles, so where are you with your project? Tell us a little bit more about when do you present this? And what's your next step after this presentation, after you're done with this project?
So after our event on Saturday, the next step is to report back to my school. So on the 22nd, I'm going to have the entire school, every senior is going to have their own presentation within the school to the lower classmen to let them know what the project is about and what our topics in particular were about. And so I'm going to give them a presentation on a lot of the same information that will be presented on Saturday, bit of an event, but also teach them my experience as a senior and help them prepare themselves for when they're going to be doing this next.
See, and that's what's fascinating. You have dude, who's and I'm going to say this, everybody that's younger than 50 for me is a kid, right? So you have this kid, right? I call everybody that. Anybody that's under 50, it's a kid for me, right? But you have somebody that's gone through it, and the level of maturity that how you're handling this and the approach, it's mind blowing to me, And I think that's what's fascinating about the message you're getting across, especially to the younger ones, that they can learn a lot from you. Because, like I said, a lot of the young folks think they know everything, and it's always easier to hear it from somebody in their age group that has gone through it or preventing them from doing something else too. So, man, that's awesome. And on the 22nd. Are we allowed to go watch you do this presentation, or are we going to make you nervous? Are you going to record it? How are you going to do this?
It's only certain guests can come, but if you want to.
Hey, I'm just hinting so you can put me on that VIP list so I can go watch it, man. Because I feel like we started with the beginning. I want to see it all the way through to where you give your final presentation. You know what I mean? So definitely, I'll support you. Sure. So as we're getting ready to wrap this up, let's talk a little bit about Saturday, right? Here's a flyer again, folks. So take a screenshot of it. There's a QR code, sign up. We're doing this at the library, so make sure that you're there on time because we're going to start right on time. Let folks know what should they expect on Saturday. And Lisa, you can take this as well too.
I think on Saturday, it's really going to shed some light into how we can be better how we can do better for our littles, how we can prepare for the next stages of development in regards to protecting what they're exposed to, what they're interested in, and really have an open conversation. There's going to be an opportunity for questions so that people can say, this is what's going on in my life. And many people don't want to ask questions because they're embarrassed. But
Yeah.
if they ask, I'm sure there's somebody in the room that has the same question, that is wondering the same thing. And we have to protect the brains of our little ones. And in particular, we want to protect their ability to regulate and their sleep cycle. And to do that, we need to address how much screen time they're getting. So to me, it's an education. It's exciting for me. This is what I do for a living. And I have been devoting my life to children for almost 40 years. And so that wealth of information is something that I really want to share. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. I was thrilled when Miles asked me to be a part of it, and to be here to be able to share that on Saturday is something that's really near and dear to my heart. And I just can't wait. I want to see who's there, and I want to see how I can give back to the community and answer those questions they may have.
And I have to tell you, that's one thing for me. It's an honor that you reached out to me to be part of this, man, because I feel that this is something phenomenal that's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And I don't think you know that yet. You know what I mean? I think you're headed in a journey where you're going to touch a lot of lives and make a lot of difference in the world. And this is what we need in our youth, right? It's good to know that, hey, we can take a breath because we have good kids that are going to just make a huge difference and a great impact in our world. So with that said, I know we're at the tail end of the show. Any last parting words, Miles?
I just want to say thank you again for all your help with this project. I really couldn't have done it without you.
You're the rock star, man. I'm just here for the ride. That's it, for sure.
Thank you, Lisa, too.
So let me, I want to thank you guys for joining us today. This is the wrap for the special edition of the Upland Forum. Thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrated the leadership and vision of Miles, a true example of what it means to lead with heart, purpose, and integrity. But we're just getting started. So join us next week as we continue to elevate voices, spotlight community champions, and bring you the conversations that matter most to Upland. Until then, stay engaged, stay inspired, and as always, stay Upland strong. We'll see you next week on the Upland Forum. And for those of you guys that are just joining us, please make sure that you attend Saturday at 11 a.m. this Saturday at the Upland Library as well, too. Until next week.